Welcome to this video on exponents and fractions. What do we mean by exponents and fractions? Well, quite simply, we're going to be looking at expressions such as this, where we have a fraction raised to a power. And this power in all of these examples will be a natural number, meaning it will be a number greater than 0 and a whole number. Okay, so let's look at example 1. So we have 2/5 quantity, notice the parentheses, right, raised to the third power. So in order to better understand this, what we can do is we can rewrite this as a multiplication problem. So 2/5 quantity to the third power is the same as 2/5 times 2/5 times 2/5. Okay? It is also the same, as 2 to the third power divided by 5 to the third power. Okay, because why? Because I have three 2's here, right? 2 times 2 times 2, right, is 2 to the third power. I have 5 times 5 times 5, that is 5 to the third power. So you can do that in your head or in a calculator. So 2 to the third power is 8, 5 to the third power is 125. So you might be wondering to yourself, gee golly, can I reduce that? Well, look at the ingredients, if you will, right? The things that we're multiplying together. Can you reduce 2/5? You can't, right? So if there's nothing in this multiplication expression that can be reduced anywhere, then the final answer cannot be reduced either. Okay, so again, 2/5 quantity to the third power is 8 over 125. Let's do another example. So the biggest difference here is that there is a negative sign now inside the parentheses. So remember, everything inside the parentheses is what's getting, in this case, raised to the second power. So when I rewrite this as multiplication, what I mean is negative 3/4 times itself. In other words, negative 3/4 times negative 3/4, right? So I could also write that, if I wanted to, as negative 3 times negative 3 over 4 times 4. Right? Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. 4 times 4 is 16. Again, if you start thinking about reducing it, well, I can't reduce this fraction or that fraction, right? There's nothing in my multiplication that can be reduced. Therefore, my final answer can also not be reduced. You could also rewrite it if you would like to. Remember last time we sort of rewrote it with an exponent in the top and bottom. We can do that, but this time we have to use parentheses. So we could rewrite it as negative 3 quantity squared divided by 4 quantity squared. And again, negative 3 quantity squared, right, that is negative 3 times negative 3. That's where the positive 9 came from, right? 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is where the 16 came from. Okay, so it's just another way to think about it, to rewrite it, to express it. Okay, and again, why do we use the parentheses? Is it because we hate ourselves? No, it's just because, right, we need to know where that negative sign goes. Is it inside? Is it invited to the party? Is it getting squared, or is it outside, right? And since it's inside, then it is going to be part of what is getting raised to the second power. All right, another example. So at this point, we've done, I feel like, enough where you could at least try these on your own. So I encourage you, for these last 4 examples, pause the video, work this out on your own, do your work, and then unpause it, maybe even scroll through or slide through and just to the answer and make sure that you're correct. Okay, so again, you certainly don't have to, but you can rewrite this as multiplication, right? 3/4 times itself, right? You have 1, 2, 3 of those. Why are there 3 of them? Because we're raising it to the third power. Okay, you could also write it as 3 to the third power over 4 to the third power. Well, 3 to the third power, type that in your calculator, it is 27. 4 to the third power, well, that's 4 times 4, which is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. Okay, again, we don't even have to ask ourselves whether or not to reduce that, right? Because if we look at our multiplication problem, right, there is nothing in here, right, that can be reduced anywhere. There's nothing at all that can be simplified. So if when I look at this part, nothing can be simplified, then I know my final answer is also fully reduced already. All right, again, pause this video, see if you can do this without my help, unpause it, and check yourself. Okay, so once again, we have this negative sign. He's back. Right, so this means negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. Okay, and if you want to write that in terms of exponents, you could write it as negative 2 quantity squared over 3 quantity squared. So negative 2 times negative 2, or negative 2 quantity squared, of course, is positive 4, and 3 times 3 is 9, or 3 squared is 9. Okay, again, I don't have to think about reducing this because there's nothing here that can be reduced, therefore the final answer can also not be reduced. Okay, again, pause the video and see if you can do this without me, then unpause it to see if you are correct. So we can rewrite this as multiplication like so, right? 6/5 quantity squared is 6/5 times itself, 6/5 times 6/5. You could also rewrite that as 6 squared over 5 squared. It's another way to think about it. And that's going to give me 36 over 25. And again, there's nothing here that can be simplified, so that also 36 over 25 can't be simplified. There's nothing that I need to do to reduce it. Okay, last example. So notice this one is different because it has a negative sign inside the parentheses, right? But then there's also a second negative sign out here. Well, how is that going to work? Let's see. Well, let's first ask ourselves, this negative sign that's outside the parentheses, is he invited to the party? Is that negative sign being raised to the third power? Well, the answer is no. And why is that? Well, the answer is simply because it's not inside the parentheses. So it's not going to be triplicated, right? So it's like, think about a copy machine, right? If you put one piece of paper through a copy machine, right? Yeah, you're going to make copies. If you have some other piece of paper and it's just sitting on top of the copy machine, right? And you don't, or sitting next to the copy machine, well, the copy machine doesn't know it's there. It's not going to make copies of it, okay? So since it's outside of those parentheses, it only occurs once. Okay, so then what are we writing for multiplication? We have negative, and then we have negative 3/5 times negative 3/5 times negative 3/5. Okay, so we have a lot of negative signs going on here. So let's just go through and see if we can kind of, simplifying a little bit. Okay, so the first thing is, notice we have minus and negative. Anytime you see two negative signs next to each other with no numbers in between, right, that becomes positive. Minus and negative becomes plus a positive. So that's going to be 3/5 times negative 3/5 times negative 3/5. Okay, so here we have a positive times a negative, so that's going to be a negative, right? So 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, and then last but not least, negative 9 times negative 3 is positive 27. Okay, so after all of that work, we end up with a positive number. It's positive 27 over positive 125. Okay, and if you think about it, another way to know whether your answer is going to be positive or negative is to count the number of negative signs we had, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs, right? If you have an odd number of negative signs, think about a light switch, right? That means you're switching it on and off an odd number of times, so the state you land in is going to be different from what you started in. Okay, here we have an even number, so that means that since there's an even number of negative signs, right, we have two pairs of negative signs essentially that cancel out and become positive.